funny because you couldn't think about it. You know, you just
Hmm.
looked at it, went into it. In the old days, we had cue cards, which were helpful because if you forgot that adjective or the P word or whatever, you could glance down and grab it and save a take. But it is a skill, and Joshua is a guy that learns very quickly too.
Well, I mean, dude, I mean, honestly, I have to say, and for you, you have been always been a big inspiration just to me personally,
Oh,
not as a
thanks.
friend, but in a sense, number one, as an actor and as a performer, because, watching you all these years and continuing to bring so much life to a character. I mean, I can't even pinpoint, you know, one decisive moment that whether it was a small scene or whether it was a long extended, year out storyline, the level of depth that you would bring this character to life has been so legendary. What do you think has made Paul's character connect so much with people all around the world?
I guess I'm I wear my emotions on my sleeve, I guess, and that's um, uh, it's valuable in the acting world, but it makes real life more difficult because uh, you're so sensitive to feelings and emotions and um, experiences and uh, it's and especially in times like these um, that it's hard to see the bright side but I think those are the qualities that Bill found in his lifetime characters, that he knew that he could count on those characters opening up their soul and letting you see, and that's pretty much um, I think people react to honesty and truth, and that would be I think would be the reason to answer your question, is that I tried to tell the truth the whole time.
So, I'm sure you've already had this question asked to you before. What would you say the difference is between Paul Williams and Doug Davidson?
Uh, Paul is probably more of an adult at this point, and there's a childlike quality that is still truly in that lives in me.
Mm-hmm.
I could spend years in Disneyland and a fantasy world and things like that. And I think Paul is like a grown up. He's the chief of police, and he really doesn't dabble in much of the fantasy. So I'd have to say that would be the greatest difference. Would be that there's a little boy still very much alive in me.
Hey, keeping a kid inside you is always the best thing, especially in these times, because when life gets so serious, you sometimes have to find that release somewhere else that you can just let that inner child come out every once in a while.
But yeah, and I think it is important. It is weird that we are in a worldwide situation where it's really hard to see the bright side. I mean, on so many levels, with the COVID and the Black Lives Matter and the political situation, and all those things are not easy to see through to the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it has definitely been, I mean, things that are happening right now in the world. It just seems like it's a never-ending cycle. Like you wake up every morning and it's always something new that you have to like face and take on and try to navigate through. And it's almost to the point where like, I feel for us in the business, even for example, like how this has changed our industry so much, people look for us for relief. And right now they can't even really get that relief because productions are just all over the map right now.
I think The Young and the Restless is one of the only shows that is up right now.
Is what?
I think Y&R is one of the only shows that is actually making new episodes right now. I think Days was down, and maybe GH is up, and Bold and Beautiful, but a lot of the nighttime shows are down. And my daughter's a violinist in London, and she would play on the West End, and completely gone. None of the musicals, none of the theater is going. I mean, it's stopped.
Hold on a second. We have a question here for you. Hold on.
Okay.
Have you ever still been in Paul Williams? Have you ever still been in Paul Williams mode and went home like that? Have you ever still been in Paul Williams mode and went home like that?
I'm very self-critical, so I usually would have a moment where I wish I could have redone something. And there were several storylines where it was difficult to go in and out. So in those times, I would stay at the studio and just completely immerse myself in what I was doing. It was easier than switching back and forth. Most of the days are easy to do, but some of the more emotional moments were they overlap.
I have to ask the question because it's my favorite storyline of yours, and I actually wish they would have played it on the recast when the show was down. The Cassandra Rawlings storyline, the dry ice episode. How did you guys pull that off? Because that's still, to me, like I literally play that scene over and over again.
I don't know how Bill did it, actually. I don't know how he came up with it. I can't tell you how complicated it was. They ran test after test after test, how quickly it melts. It was quite a science experiment to actually make that whole thing.
Have you ever, like, for yourself, have you ever, gotten the script and literally, because I know I've experienced this, where you look at a script and you are so mind boggled of like what you're reading, where you're like, this just doesn't make no fucking sense, but you still gotta go ahead and do it anyway. How do you find that challenge?
That is really, really hard for me personally, because I talked about telling the truth. And if it's something that you don't understand or can't get behind, it makes finding your truth that much harder. I have, there are some classic, I don't remember that. I wish you would have told me that you were going to ask that, because I take pictures of the lines in the scripts that I have the most difficult time with. Okay. And I've saved some classic one. The one that comes to mind right now was about, it was with Sharon and Home for Misbegotten Women and adoptive, but it was all crunched into one sentence. And I took a screenshot of it, and I just recently saw it. I'll send it to you.
Please. Because I always tell Sharon all the time when we speak, and I'm like, because sometimes she gets some scripts where I'm like, you really got to do that? And but the thing with her is that, like, she can take chicken salad and turn it into gold, and I'm just like, how can you, with a straight face? And she's like, they can throw nursery rhymes at me, they can throw Mother Goose rhymes at me, and I'm just gonna come in there and play it like it's I gotta give my best to it every single time.
I have honestly asked her how she does it, but you're absolutely right. She is that is definitely one of her gifts. She can, and she doesn't take it home. she separates herself. She never takes. There's no stress or pressure with her. She's always in a good mood and cheery, and we could all stand to have a little of that Sharon Case quality.
Oh, trust me. If the world was duplicated with a million Sharons, we'd all be in a great mood all day long.
And she's really fun to boot on top of it all.
Oh yeah, no, between her and Josh, who I've traveled with many times to do appearances, and I remember the first time she came on an appearance with us, and Josh had bet me. He's like, I'm going to bet you $100. He's like, Sharon's such a grandmother. She'll be in bed by 9 o'clock, and your night's going to be over. I have the video to prove. It was 6 in the morning, and Sharon was still dancing, partying, yelling, screaming, hollering, having fun. And I woke Josh up the next day and said, I thought you said she was going to be in bed by 9. She was up till 6 o'clock in the morning partying. And I'm like, have anyone I've ever traveled with, she's probably my most fun person to do
absolutely, yeah. He's pretty funny too.
Josh is very, very funny too.
Yeah,
very, very funny.
A very quick wit.
So for you, in the sense number one, like what was your? Everyone has their journey and their story of how they got into this crazy business. What led you into this business? Was it your first passion, your first love?
Well, I've told this story before, but growing up, and I grew up in the infancy of television, where we had half-hour shows like Combat and Whirlybird and Rescue 8, and I was fascinated by playing those roles. And I had a hat box, like an Army helmet and a knight in shining armor helmet and a fire helmet, and I could dress up for all these things. I actually put Rescue 8 numbers on the sides of my mom's car, which was a Buick, and we drove around town like that. So I was kind of hooked into that fantasy aspect, and really the only place you can do that in real life is in the movie business.
Did you ever feel, I mean, in these long 30+ years in daytime, of making that jump into film?
It was a totally different industry. It's more spread out now because we have the advent of cable and streaming, and so there's less definition between a daytime actor, a nighttime actor, and a film actor. But they were three separate entities when I first started, and it was incredibly hard to make the jump from one to another. And now, you've got big movie stars doing television, you've got television stars that are doing movies. I mean, it would be hard to find one that. I mean, Ryan Reynolds started in television. I mean, I just think about. And then I would see him on with Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, or whatever it was, and it was pretty obvious then that the gifts that would make him so popular were very evident at that time, even though the show didn't go anywhere. But I think it's easier now to cross over than it used to be.
Well, that's the thing. For me, every time I watch you, I've said this to many people. I've always viewed you as, like, our late friend Christophe St. John, who was known as the Denzel of daytime. I've always pictured you as the Paul Newman of daytime. Like, you've always brought this to me, more of a dramatic feel as an actor than a daytime actor. And to me, it's like watching Paul grow over the years, watching you grow over the years, I feel even now, even like, even in the sense of where times have changed, you've only gotten more polished, more fine-tuned, more in touch, not just with the character itself, but bringing an element that, to me, has been lost in daytime for so long where, you know, as you said, with the bells, it was drama. It was what built the show. It was that heavy storyline where you could take a story and it was almost like what I realize now, the differences, you know, between daytime then and daytime now, where there it was like, it was a marathon. It wasn't a sprint. Like the way that the Bells wrote, it was almost like where he'd write a storyline and it would start here. And then a year later, it would all sort of come together, but it wasn't like this rushed race where we had to like now where it's like you're putting out scripts, they're putting out storylines, and then all of a sudden the storyline just goes left. And then they're like, 2 weeks later, it's gone. And it's almost to the point where like they feel the audience is just like stupid, where they're like, okay, well, where were you going with that storyline? And then it just, there's no ending to it. And that's where I feel like for you, I've always was surprised that you stayed doing daytime as long as you did. Because I'm like, this is a guy that needs to be in an HBO or a major, you know, prime time element, because the way that you bring, to me, storytelling, not just to Paul's character, but just to the way that your approach to